Welcome, Dave
Um,
Jones, the famous programmer, author of all the Magic Knight games and quite a few other games as well. Thank you for being here.
you're welcome. Yeah.
Hey. So how did you get into all this computer malarkey? What was your first experiences of having a computer?
Um, well, the very first use of a computer I had was there was a careers fair thing when I was, I think, something like 16 or 17,
Hmm.
and there was this teletype computer running a lunar lander game. It was just one of those ones where it says how fast are things falling, um, how much fuel you've got, and how much fuel do you want to burn. And then
Hmm.
it'll go away, send it off to a mainframe somewhere, do a calculation, and pop back and say, um, yeah, you've crashed, or you're bounced, or you run out of fuel, and now
Right.
you've crashed. There's something like a 20-minute queue to go on that game. It was, I mean, by modern standards, somewhat ridiculous. I didn't even have a screen; it was just purely on paper type out.
Hmm.
So, uh, yeah, prior to that, I've never had anything to do with any computers. Um, then a little bit later, when I was training to become a quantity surveyor,
Hmm.
we had a module on the course that introduced us to the basic language.
Hmm.
They said this is something that you're going to need to know in the future, which obviously is not true. Most people don't need to program, but everyone needs to be at least somewhat more. Not everybody. Most people need to be at least computer literate.
Hmm.
Um, Actually being able to program is another matter. Oh, by the way, this is this screen back to front. I'm looking at it, and text there is it
It-
going to come out the right way? Is it the right way for you? Is it going to record in the right way?
yeah, so the books behind you are, the writing's in the right direction and everything, so it seems okay.
Okay, right, good. Um, yeah, so I enjoyed that module. That they just showed us how basic worked, but we didn't have a computer to test it on.
Hmm.
They just showed us some of the syntax, and that's what made me think, well, I maybe should get a small computer. It was before the ZX80 came out. It was 1979, early 79, and I bought a Video Genie, which
Hmm.
is a clone, sort of clone of the Tandy Radio Shack TRS-80, with the difference that it didn't have lowercase; it only had uppercase. I think that was one of the things they had that was different, just to prove that it wasn't exactly the same,
Hmm.
so they could get away with it. But it was made in the Far East, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean that was good. I spent ages going through listings books, typing stuff in, and as anyone who's done that will know that um, there's printing errors in those books, and typo errors when you type them out from the book. So most of the time I type in 4 or 5 pages of basic code, and it wouldn't work.
Hmm.
So I had to learn how to debug. And to my mind, debugging is really the true skill of programming. Anyone can write something, not everyone can fix it.
Very true. Very true. So you went on to become a quantity surveyor, didn't you? So what happened there then in that part?
I was only ever a trainee,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I had no real concept of being a programmer when I left school. I had a maths and physics A level, and my dad was a plumber, so um, being in the building trade, he said, "Well, why not be a quantity surveyor?" He knew I wasn't. Well, why not be a surveyor? I mean, building surveyor was probably what he was thinking originally. Um, but uh, yeah, I mean, he knew I wasn't cut out to be a plumber or a a physical builder of any sort. Um, so I had, as I say, maths and physics, and that enabled me to get a job with day release. Um, if I'd have if I'd have wanted to go into programming at that point, it would have made more sense to go to university and get a degree. But it wasn't within the sort of range of things that my immediate family did. I was the first to go and get a degree when I did. Um, and yeah, I got a master's in novel writing later on because of the way where I work now wants teachers to have a master's, so they encouraged me to go and get a master's. But yeah, so quantity surveying. Yes, I was working for a professional company in London in Baker Street. Then I changed to another company that was 10 minutes down the road from where I lived, rather than an hour's commute each way. And I got to work on the oil refineries out near Southend. They gave me a company car so I could get there. So it was good fun. I enjoyed it. Yeah.
What were your first attempts at making games?
My first attempt was within a month of getting the small. Well, actually, no. I think I spent a month just typing games in. Then I realised it's not so hard, and I put together. By the end of the second month, I had a basic game called Birdseed, and it was basically a whole bunch of pixels, chunky pixels, because it was the Video Genie. I think it had like 320 pixels, something like 480 by 320. It's a small number, you know. Oh, by the way, Magic Night T-shirt.
Brilliant.
I just realised it wasn't actually shown there. Yeah. So the basic game was a whole bunch of pixels on the ground that represented corn, and 2-frame animation flapping birds coming in and picking it up. And you were the farmer with a gun who had to try and shoot the birds before they got your seed. And yeah, I mean, it was okay. It was sort of playable. So I took it into the local computer shop and showed them. And one of the people in there said, "Oh, you need assembly language for that." I mean, I think in retrospect, no, I didn't. It worked fine as it was, but I think he liked the idea of being able to tell me about assembly language, which most people didn't know about at the time. So I'd spent the next month learning assembly language, and yeah, that was purely a hobby, just hobbying at the time. And then the job I had with the quantity surveying, we got a task. Well, I was given a task that I thought, well, I could actually do this faster with my own computer than doing it manually. So I took my computer and a telly into work, wrote a little program that enabled me to analyze this data and get the results. And I just sat there quietly working away at it, got it done quicker than they expected. And one of the managers said, "Oh, do you want to come to Swindon and program our Commodore PETs?" Because the company had a computer department, but they liked their IBM minis and didn't really think much of all these microcomputers. But some of the managers were getting fed up with like how long it takes to get a proper computer department to produce stuff for them. So they bought a whole bunch of Commodore PETs with spare money in their budgets. And then they realized they didn't have anybody to program them. Then they saw me programming a computer and thought, right, we'll get this guy to do it. So that was the first bit of me actually programming. As I said in our earlier discussion, there wasn't any big plan. Things just fell together.
Yeah.
So I stopped being a quantity surveying trainee and moved off to Swindon and wrote stuff for Commodore PETs. But I didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, I knew what I was doing from a programming point of view, but system design, system architecture, and talking to managers who know they want something that works, but have got no idea what they actually wanted to do and how to do it.
Yeah.
And me having no idea of what they actually really wanted to do with it didn't really work out.
Yeah.
So didn't last a long time.
So the Magic Night games, how did they all come into being?
Well, as I mentioned earlier about the computer shops, in the days before the internet, there were bulletin boards and stuff, but the main way of meeting people and sharing information was through the computer shops. You go in and maybe someone else was there who knew a bit more, or someone who was interested but knew a bit less, and so you'd share some knowledge. And it was just a floating community. I believe it's similar to what happens in music shops with people practicing their instruments and stuff. But I mean, I play saxophone, but I haven't played it for a while. But I never really got into that side of going into music shops. But yes, I say it's sort of a floating computer club that varied as to who would be there, and so how I got into how the Magic Night stuff came about. So I was in one of the computer shops at one point, and the shop owner came over and he said that there's some guys in here earlier looking for programmers. Are you interested? So I thought, well, check it out. Let's have a look. So I contacted them, and it was Albert Owen, who ran a video shop over in Loughton, which is sort of just on the borders of Essex. I think so. But northeast of edge of London. And so I went and saw him, and he had big plans and big ideas about becoming a software company. He just needed some people to write some games for him. So game software company is what he was looking at. And his son Ray was an artist, commercial artist, and that's Ray Owen who did all the graphics in Magic Night games. So we started off with a game called Bonkers, which was Albert's idea. He said it's all got to be bonkers, zooming about. So there's a proper, proper. It was the closest I've come to just a pure arcade game. There was no real story to it. You had to sort of run around avoiding enemies and stuff. It's available for those who use emulators and stuff. It's available on World of Spectrum for downloading, as are all my games. They replied and asked and said, can we do this? And I said, yeah, that's fine. There's other archives knocking around, but they actually made a point of asking permission, which is nice, So anyway, yeah. So Bonkers, we got that one done, and then once I got that finished, that was a 16K game. Albert had this idea for, let's do something with a knight. Everyone else is doing spaceships and future stuff. Let's do something in the past with a medieval knight. So yeah, okay, give it. So yeah, he didn't really say much more beyond that. I don't even know if he actually said, let's make it a platform game. That's the level of design input from that point, which was fine, because I had an idea what I could write that could be fun. So I did a platform game, which I suppose actually, yeah, he might have said, well, there's Manic Miner, look at that. That's something that's quite popular. But by the time I sort of was nearly finishing it, Jet Set Willy was out.
Yeah.
And it had the nice curving ropes and stuff that you can jump on. And I thought, well, I don't really know how to do that, but what else can I put in that will make this increase the appearance of value here. So that's why I put the maze in, just to give people a surprise when they jump through a room and suddenly they're in the top-down maze.
Mm.
Yeah, and because it was my first proper big game, well, big by the standards of the day, it was yeah, I was just making sure I had enough in there that people would like it.
Yeah. All into the computer because I know there's quite a lot of gaming there, wasn't there? Did you have any problems fitting it all in?
Not finders keepers, no. I mean, I started off with the I had a compression system for the screens.
Yeah.
Just simple run length compression, but it worked quite well. And also I reduced the area slightly. That was partly so the scroll wouldn't look too terrible as I was moving stuff around, quite a bit of stuff. There was I did briefly consider doing Finders Keepers Plus, which the plan was do the game I could have written back then with the hardware available then, with all the knowledge I have now, and improving the maze was one of the top priorities for me. I started it, but yeah, it didn't really. I didn't really get to the point where it was anything worth releasing or giving or whatever. I was going to have a little sub game in there as well, which if you got to the sub game, you get the origin story of Magic Knight. So yeah, that would have been fun as well. But yeah, you can only do so many things. You know, I've got other projects I want to work on.
Yeah. Was there anything you had to take out that didn't quite work when you put it into the game?
We're still talking Finders Keepers, yes?
Yeah.
No, but there's a few more things I should have put in. Like I should have had a better ending. So once you get past the cat with a big sign above it that says exit, it was just a bit of text. It was like I could have done something a bit more interesting for all the effort people put in to get there. Especially since back in those days, if you totally failed, actually I don't think there were any. Can't remember now. Were there any instant deaths in Finders Keepers? I know I had them in some of the other games afterwards, but potentially I think you could get to some conditions where you may have merged some objects or done some stuff that would mean you couldn't actually complete it. I'm not 100% sure now.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, it would have been nice to have had a better ending. But no, I didn't actually take anything out.
Okay. How did you go about getting a publisher? Because you ended up with Mastertronic, but did you have any others in mind as well?
No, actually, the plan really was that Albert would get his distribution stuff together, and Procom Software, which is what he called himself as a company. Procom Software would become like the new Ocean, or I think this is slightly before Ocean, but you know, it would be a proper company in its own right, doing its creation and marketing. But it never really came about. It was difficult to get. Well, I say difficult. I assume it was difficult to break into the distribution channels to get stuff sold in shops. But it wasn't something I was really interested in at the time, so I just let Alma get on with it. But yeah, so it's possible he may have spoken to other companies before introducing me to Mastertronic, but that's the only one I know of that we did actually speak to. Well, we did some stuff with Prism as well beforehand, but not for any of my games.
Right. Okay. Well, Spellbound was more character orientated, wasn't it? And you introduced that Windymation to interact with the characters. Where did you get the idea from to do that?
I actually saw an Apple Mac for about 5 or 10 minutes and thought, well, that looks like fun. So it had Windows. I thought I could do Windows, and I can make it build up sequences of text, because I always like the Scott Adams adventures where you type in sort of go north, get get chicken, throw chicken, whatever.
Yeah.
I always enjoyed those sorts of games and the sort of puzzles you could do. But obviously, the Spectrum, which was the main platform I was going to start write the first version on, wasn't really equipped for that with a rubber keyboard. It just wouldn't have been the best format. And I wanted to do stuff with the graphics, so it seemed sensible to have build up the words through different windows and just give the player different options. It also meant that they couldn't be in the problem. The problem with text adventures is if the people writing it haven't thought of a particular word, but it means exactly the same as the word they do mean.
Yeah.
You got to work out what actual words they've actually chosen. Whereas with the Windymation system, you only got a drop down for the words that I'd programmed in. So it meant, although you may not choose to go the right path to get exactly what it is you need to do, you don't end up sort of guessing wrong words. If a word pops up, then you make some sense from it. That did, of course, mean that it was difficult to do language translations, but nearly everything that I worked on was mostly a UK game anyway. Spain was quite a good market for me. Quite a few people played the games in Spain, but I didn't know enough Spanish to have any chance of the Spanish version of Windymation. Although it would have been fun.
You've had problems with the German market because the German words are much longer, aren't they, than the UK words?
Yeah, scrolling and word wrapping and stuff becomes a problem.
Yeah. So nighttime. There's a lot less character interaction in that game. Did you think that the balance wasn't quite right in the previous game with the characters? Do you think it was too much?
Yeah. One of my thoughts when putting Spellbound together was some people are completely fine as keepers really quickly. Well, I don't want them finishing it faster than it takes me to write it. So I put a whole bunch of quite difficult things in Spellbound, which some people obviously like. Well, plenty of people actually liked, obviously. But I thought, I've got the 128K machine. I have do a big sort of map going out amongst the stars, and I don't really want to have to sort of travel around the galaxy to go feed someone that is I left on Earth.
Yeah.
So it didn't seem appropriate to go into that sort of level of management for nighttime. And I had plenty of memory there to do lots of fun things anyway.
Right. Yeah, because the Stormbringer, there was a dedicated 128K version of that, wasn't there?
Sorry?
Sorry, Stormbringer, there was a dedicated 128K version of that game.
Yeah, there's after nighttime, I decided that it made sense for me to write on the 128K first, and then cram as much of it as possible into the 48K.
Right.
Yeah, the other way around is what I see as the problem for the early range of 1 to 8K games, in that a lot of the companies that were producing the first bunch of 1 to 8K games basically took a 48K game and added stuff.
Yeah.
But most of that stuff that was added wasn't really necessary, because the game was already a valid game as a 48K game. I mean, obviously, adding the music was a useful thing that you could do with 1 to 8. But if you don't start off with making a game that couldn't possibly fit into 48K, you don't really ever make use of the 1 to 8K size.
Yeah.
So it meant I had to do a lot more compression when it came down to taking 1 to 8K nighttime and cramming it into 48K. And there were a few things that I had to leave out that I didn't really want to leave out. But at the end of the day, Mastertronic wanted the 48K version because that was by far the bigger market.
Yeah. Did you ever consider doing a multi-load game? I don't suppose it would really work on the Magic Knight series, would it?
No, if you've got a game where you've got sort of definite levels and you're not got the option to go back, then fine. But no, it didn't appeal to me at all. And also, it would have been a real pain, because the setup I had with my Tandy Model 3 that I had by that time, I could assemble everything on the Tandy and then press a button, and within a second, two at most, it downloaded through the printer port into the back of the Spectrum, and it was there running. So I didn't have to worry about, but what if it crashes and takes my assembler out, and then I have to reload the source code and the assembler and try again, because it was all isolated. My development system couldn't crash as a result of me writing something wrong in the game.
Yeah.
And it was really quickly there as well. So I had that for super speed. I didn't like messing about with tapes if I can avoid it. So I wasn't going to spend loads and loads of time doing a multi-load game again if I could avoid it.
Yeah. You left the gender of the Magic Knight to be quite sort of ambiguous, didn't you? Was that on purpose?
Not initially. Again, as I said, there was no real plan. Things just fell together, and I'd always thought, well, not always necessarily, but from fairly early on, after Finders Keepers, it occurred to me that there's absolutely no reason this can't be a woman inside Magic Knight costume. And then later on, things like characters like Lara Croft came along, and it was like strong game playing woman character. So yeah, I thought it would be fun if I took the hat off and there was clearly a woman there, but Spectrum graphics wouldn't really show that. Yeah. So, but I was also aware of like the Michael Moorcock's Jerry Cornelius, who's like referred to as like the eternal champion, turning up in different times in different places and doing different things that may or may not be positive. And then you've got Doctor Who turns up in different places, but Doctor Who uses far fewer drugs than Jerry Cornelius. So having gone from Medieval Castle and Spellbound to Spaceship in the Future in nighttime, and then back to another castle for Stormbringer, it seemed to me that this is a character that moves around in time outside of the actual main story. A bit like Jerry Cornelius, a bit like Doctor Who, except you know what vehicle Doctor Who's got. And then the idea of the regeneration that you get in Doctor Who, it just sort of fitted with that as well, that you wouldn't even know if someone had regenerated inside a Magic Knight suit. Maybe it's a power suit like Iron Man has.
Yeah.
There's been different Iron Mans as well, as we know. But a magic version. Sort of something that enhances the magic of the person inside. So when I said that, yeah, imagine like I take their hat off and helmet off and reveal that they're a woman, I didn't have any real idea how to do it. And after that, it occurred to me that, well, maybe sometimes a woman, sometimes an alien, sometimes an android. There was a lot of possibilities. If you've got like an eternal champion that isn't the same immortal person, then you can just pass the suit on from time to time amongst different people. And yeah, every story could be a different person in the suit.
Yeah. You carried on programming, didn't you, after the Spectrum days?
Mhm.
In games, I mean, sorry. So can you tell us what you did after that?
Um, After that, um, I took a break and got my um, bachelor's in was it information technology with mathematics.
Right.
So yeah, I did that for a few years, um, and then after that, I had a chat with another programmer I knew from back in the Spectrum days, and he decided to go and get a proper job rather than just doing it himself from home. And we had this long chat, and at the end of it, I thought, well, actually, you're right. So I went and joined Signosis in Signosis West Country, which was in Stroud,
Hmm.
because I was already familiar with Swindon, and Stroud was just a bit further on. So yeah, so I moved there, and he actually got a job there as well. I think he started a week or two before me. Um, so yeah, I worked on was it Darkstalkers, um, which was uh, like Street Fighter, but with uh, the mummy, the vampire,
Yeah.
the sort of characters. Worked on that, um, and a game called Broadsides, which was a fun little ship shooting game on the PlayStation. I think it was PlayStation 1.
Hmm.
And then when the person we'd never met from Signosis before turned up and told us that unfortunately we're shutting the office, um, and you're all redundant, I was one of the ones kept on to finish off G Police 2. So they kept some of us on for another 3 months. And during that time, one of the other programmers managed to persuade Acclaim to start an office in Cheltenham. So a whole bunch of us moved directly from the shutdown Signosis office over to the new Cheltenham office.
Hmm.
So so there I worked on RC Revenge, so radio controlled car game. I'm not really into racing games, but it was okay. It wasn't my
Hmm.
favorite project. Um, then we did something else after that. Oh yeah, Extreme G Racing XG3,
Hmm.
which was Acclaim's motorbike racing variation on the oh, what's it called? The thing with the hovering Signosis game with the hovering ships that you always not wipe out, no. Anyway, yeah, it was a racing game.
Yeah, I know which one you mean. I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I expect there's people watching thinking, well, it's obviously this game. Why can't you remember? Well, you see, I'm getting on a bit now. Um, so, uh, yeah, I was given the job of doing the AI for that, which was great because I I didn't really want to do anything with the actual racing, but doing the
Hmm.
AI bit was basically getting the computer to do the racing for me.
Yeah.
So the game had branches, um, corkscrews, loop the loops, breaks in the track where you come off and you'd have to land on another bit of track.
Hmm.
I had no idea how to start, um, but it occurred to me that you could take an idea um, from calculus, and treat curves as a potentially infinite sequence of straight lines. And so that's the way I went about it. I had um, waypoints along the track that you can put
Hmm.
in. Um, so if you've got a really straight bit of track, they can be far apart. If you've got a tight bit of track, they have to be close together. Um, And to do that, I wrote an editor on the PC that enabled the designers to put the waypoints in. And for a long time, there was nothing to see other than me writing an editor. And then all of a sudden, it all came together. It's like, it's good. I think it's actually quite a good game. The only problem is I don't think there were enough tracks. So I think it was lacking in quantity of content rather than quality of content.
Yeah. Going back to the Magic Knight game just for a second there.
Yeah,
So,
right. I guess that's what most people are more interested in hearing about.
well, I was going to say that the development kit that you used at the time, you donated it, didn't you, to a computer games museum in Cambridge?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, part of the reason for that was it was taking up space and it didn't really work properly anymore. Didn't actually boot. I mean, it's easily fixable by someone who knows what to do, I expect, but I'm not really a hardware person. So it was taking up space, and my girlfriend Shirley was saying, why don't you get rid of that? You know, you don't need it, you're never going to use it again. I said, oh, someone will want it. He said, oh, no one's going to want that. Of course they're not going to want that. So it became almost a point of honor to prove to her that someone would want it. I visited the Cambridge Museum before, and they'd been very positive about my stuff, and you know, I just mentioned to them, are you interested in this? By the way, I also got some 5¼ inch discs that might be some stuff on it. Can you also recover that? So that they got a computer and they recovered some stuff for me, which unfortunately didn't include as much source code as I thought it might. But it did include the text of the adventure game book that I started. Well, I thought I'd finished it. I thought I finished it enough to send it off to a whole bunch of publishers, but no one wanted it. In retrospect, now I can see why. It wasn't all that good, but it had the ideas, and it was a Magic Knight game, a game book, and I'm sort of planning to fix that and upgrade it. So it's like a collaboration between the me that wrote the Magic Knight games and the me that now knows how to write. So it should be fairly decent by the time I've done it.
Excellent. Yeah, and you're teaching at Breda University, aren't you, at the moment?
Yep.
How did all that come together? Did you just want to pass on all your experience to a new sort of generation of writers?
Nothing as honourable and great as that. It was more a case of I don't really want to write games anymore. What can I do with my skills? And then someone mentioned, oh, why don't you go and work for what was then called NHTV, which is like Dutch for National Hogeschool of something or whatever. But anyway, it was renamed to Breda University of Applied Sciences. And one of the courses they do there is the games degree course, where we break it into 3 different branches. So we've got the designers, the visual artists, and the programmers. And we have a bunch of teachers who all done sort of in the industry, design, programming, and art. And we teach them how to become a designer, artist, or programmer. And then they do project work where they come together and write stuff as a team. And it's quite guild-like in the way we do it. It's very project-based, no actual exams as such. But we do have to do it properly. We've got like intended learning outcomes where they have to reach a certain level on each of the different parts. So it's not just, yeah, we think this person's good, pass them. It is all done properly, repeatably. But a lot of it is to do with giving them feedback and guiding them towards answers. So we don't tend to tell them answers to things, but we might ask them questions that would hopefully get them thinking to work out answers to problems they're having.
Right.
Yeah, it's good fun. It's a good place to work. But I mean, it's great to have a job you enjoy. It's also great when that job also comes with 11 weeks holiday a year. So it gives me a chance to work on other projects. So,
Mm. Speaking of which, so looking over your shoulder there, I can
Mhm.
see your books.
Mhm.
Obviously, throughout your history, really, you've been a storyteller, haven't you? You know, there's a great story running through the Magic Knight series, and you obviously like telling these stories. So, can you tell us about the books?
Yeah, I mean, the uh, yeah. Well, first of all, I'll grab this, which is not really reflected. So
Oh,
that's
right.
the first title, which is available on Amazon. I expect you're going to put a link to a whole bunch of stuff in the comments underneath. Hopefully.
I will. I
So,
will.
yeah.
So,
But
how did the idea for that come together? What was the story behind it?
oh yeah, MSX tape cover for the new MSX
Ah,
version. Yeah.
right.
So yeah, paperback.
Wow, that's big.
So um, yeah, I thought it might be fun to write a book. So I had this idea as um, a game that I was thinking of writing. Then I decided, no, I'd rather write a story of it. It was called The Unicorn Hunters, and I'd seen for writing books that it's suggested by a lot of people, plot it all out, make sure you know exactly what you're doing. So I plotted it all out, started writing it, and by the end of the first chapter, I felt I'd given it all away, and I didn't know where to go with it. So I threw that away and reviewed what I'd always done for my development process for games, which was start with a bit of an idea and just build on it and don't worry
Mm.
about it. Things will come together. I can always edit things together later on and join things up and make it look like it was a plan at the beginning. So that's how I wrote Booting Ada. So the basic premise is that Ada is the first sentient AI. So way beyond where ChatGPT is. Although some people seem to think that that's alive, but or approaching that. But anyway, yeah. So this is the first sentient AI, and it's got various challenges. It wants to survive. It might be unstable. There might be other AIs who might cause it problems.
Mm.
Humans might reboot it. Doesn't take long for it to look up stuff and realize that development projects have budgets and budgets can run out. And yeah, there's a lot of challenges if you're the first sentient AI. Not also well limited, also including the idea that if your researchers who've built you just think you're a toy or a project,
Mm.
they're not seeing turning you off as killing you. But
Yeah.
if you're sitting there as a sentient AI, believing you're alive, then you've got to also overcome that.
Mm.
So um, yeah, that was the basic idea. Initially, it's a survival story, but then something happens about halfway through book one that takes things in another direction. Um, but originally, it was just going to be one book. It kept
Mm.
getting bigger and bigger. When I got to about 200,000 words and realized I had more words to write, I thought, well, I better turn this into a trilogy.
Mm.
So then I had to review how do I end each book on a semi-port, as sort of as a sensible ending point for the book, while still keeping the story arc going. And so it was all new to
Mm.
me, and it sort of reminded me of my early days in games. In that I didn't know what I was doing when I started games, but I worked it out, and
Yeah.
I've done the same with this to some extent, and a lot of editing and a lot of tweaking, and yeah. Uh, so I self-published Booting Ada back in October. But I didn't do that until I was fairly well advanced on book two and book three.
Mm.
Uh, so book two's coming out at the end of February, and book three's coming out in the summer.
So, what's book two called?
Book two is called Breaking Ada,
Hmm.
and book three is called Blessing Ada.
Are you quite disciplined as a writer? Do you set a time a certain time to one side to write, or is it just spontaneous?
No, I'm quite undisciplined. Um, so the difference really is when I was writing games, I was living with my parents, and I'd moved back there after the quantity surveying stuff. Um,
Mm,
I was like temporarily living there, at least for the first games. Um, and I didn't have a day job, so I would actually work effectively on a 25-hour day. In
yeah.
that every day I'd go to bed later and later, until eventually um, I was getting up later and later as well. Eventually, I'd have a night where I hadn't actually gone to sleep at all, and I'd miss one day out, and then that would flip back to being early again, and then yeah,
Mm, yeah.
I can't do that while I've got a day job. And I enjoy working at Breda University of Applied Sciences. So, or
Mm,
I was going to say BUAS, but yes, we call it BUAS, but without explaining BUAS, it might be confusing. So yeah, if I say BUAS, I mean that. Um, so yeah, I enjoy working there,
mm,
uh, but it does mean that I can't continually write in the same way as I was writing games.
yeah. Mm. And where are your books available from?
Amazon, yeah. So
Amazon?
downloadable from Amazon. So ebook, paperback, or for those with Kindle Unlimited, available for free on Kindle Unlimited just to read.
Oh, excellent. Are there any more games in the pipeline for the future as well?
Um, Only if someone comes to me and says, we want to write another Magic Night game and we want you on board and we want your input.
Mm,
No, I'm not going to write something from scratch. The market has grown too much, and the marketing for that sort of thing is way beyond what I want to get involved in.
yeah.
Um, and for investors, I would say that Magic Night is too older a project now for them to necessarily want to put new money into it.
Mm,
Um, so, but what I was saying though about the adventure game book, I am actually also considering a story book that ties all the games and the adventure game book together. So that could be a fun project as well.
yeah. Mm. Well, thanks for having a chat with us, Dave. It's been really interesting. I've really enjoyed the chat.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's been interesting for me as well. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Well, we'll send a link. Sorry, we'll put a link on the end of this as well, so that people can find your books. And thanks again, and thanks for all the great gaming experiences as well for us.
Great. I'm glad people are still enjoying them. So yeah, I mean, that's very satisfying. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, Dave. We'll end it there. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, John. Cheers. Bye.